at the pump. President Joe Biden announces plans to lower gas prices. We're at the White House. Republican request. Senator Chuck Grassley wants more information on business transactions involving the president's son. Fighting back. A TV news anchor from Nebraska says she was fired for circulating a pro-life petition. And finding peace. Pope Francis tells the faithful that examining our life can lead us to Christ. On EWTN News Nightly for Wednesday, October 19th, 2022. Thank you so much for being with us tonight. I'm Tracy Sabol. As most Americans keep shelling out well over $3 for a gallon of gas, and in some places more than $5, President Joe Biden announces the release of more oil from the U.S. Strategic Reserve. The move comes after OPEC Plus nations cut oil production, prompting a White House warning. White House correspondent Owen Jensen reports. Owen?
Tracy, good evening to you. Tonight, AAA says the average price for a gallon of gas nationwide stands at $3.85 right now. The White House knows that will not win votes. So today, the president's announcement that more oil, 15 million barrels to be precise, will be released from the SPR, the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, and that is now at its lowest level in decades.
President Joe Biden talks gas prices.
They're now down more than 27 cents a gallon in Wisconsin this past week, 27 cents in Oregon, 16 cents in Ohio, 25 cents in Nevada, 17 cents in Indiana.
Amidst persistently high prices at the pumps, the administration has been trying to show it's working to bring those prices down, especially with the control of Congress on the line in less than 3 weeks.
My message to the American energy companies is this. You should not be using your profits to buy back stock or for dividends. Not now. Not while a war is raging.
But Arizona Congressman Andy Biggs tweets today the Biden administration could have unleashed American energy by increasing domestic exploration, development, and production of fossil fuels. Instead, it depleted America's national emergency oil reserves. The stockpile was never meant to bail out failed energy policies. And U.S. Senator John Kennedy of Louisiana tweets today, looks like Biden is poised to announce another sell-off of oil from our Strategic Petroleum Reserve to hide the effects of his reckless spending and anti-American energy obsession. Draining U.S. energy reserves like this is as cynical as it is irresponsible. Meanwhile, former President Barack Obama trying to energize Democratic voters. He posted a video on Twitter to his 133 million followers.
Election day is right around the corner. And I want to be clear about what's at stake. Our fundamental rights are on the ballot, especially women's reproductive rights.
Also tonight, a new AP NORC poll reveals this. Only about half of Americans have high confidence that their votes in the upcoming midterm elections will be counted accurately. And some more numbers here for you. Just 9% of U.S. adults think democracy is working either extremely or very well, and 52% of Americans say democracy is not working well. At the White House, Owen Jensen, EWTN News Nightly.
Well, the ranking Republican senator of the Judiciary Committee says new whistleblower documents revealed that President Biden, quote, was aware of Hunter Biden's business arrangements and may have been involved in some of them. And that senator is now demanding that the FBI investigate. Capitol Hill correspondent Eric Rosales reports. Eric?
Well, good evening, Tracy. In a release sent to EWTN News Nightly, Senator Chuck Grassley states that several whistleblowers have contacted him, claiming that the FBI has a series of documents in its possession showing that the Biden family did in fact engage in potential criminal activity. Now, the Iowa senator is now demanding answers. Republican Senator Chuck Grassley attached a contract to his letter sent to the FBI and DOJ. The contract was signed by President Joe Biden's son Hunter, the president's brother James, and 3 other business associates. Senator Grassley states, according to an FBI interview summary, it shows the contract was part of an arrangement designed to funnel some $5 million from a Chinese Communist government-connected company to Hunter and James Biden. to compensate them for work done while Joe Biden was vice president. The senator says other records held by the FBI reveal frustration by the Bidens about the payment being delayed. The Iowa senator adds other records shed light on Hunter Biden's financial relationship with Burisma, a Ukrainian gas company. Senator Grassley says these documents allegedly show detailed conversations with private individuals relevant to potential criminal conduct by Hunter, and also indicates that Joe Biden was aware of Hunter Biden's business arrangements and may have been involved in some of them. Republicans tell me they plan to investigate.
The country deserves the truth. They deserve to, and if the American people put us in the majority, we plan on doing that.
It's important to note that EWTN News Nightly and other media have asked the White House for a comment about Biden's family business dealings. Now, the press secretary has referred all answers from the DOJ, and we've asked the DOJ for a comment, but it tells us that it does not comment on an ongoing investigation. At the Capitol, Eric Rosales, EWTN News Nightly.
Republican Senator Marco Rubio and Democrat challenger Val Demings held their only debate last night in Florida. They clashed on several issues, including abortion.
100% pro-life, not because I want to deny anyone their rights, but because I believe that innocent human life is worthy of the protection of our laws.
No, I don't think it's okay for you to make decisions for women and girls. As a senator, I think those decisions are made between the woman, her family, her doctor, and her faith.
Well, the two also faced questions on inflation, voting rights, immigration, and foreign policy. A newscaster in Nebraska says that she was fired for circulating a pro-life petition. Melanie Sandiford was an anchor and news director at an NBC affiliate in North Platte, Nebraska. She was fired last month after participating in an initiative to make her hometown a sanctuary city for the unborn. She says she was not on the clock at the time and was fired just hours after a local newspaper reported on her pro-life activity. And we go now to Melanie Sandiford with more on her story. Melanie, thanks so much for your time today. We appreciate it. I want to get right to it. I know that you're really involved in your church and that you've worked on pro-life issues there before. And apparently I understand that the management at your TV station, they actually knew about that. So what happened this time and what was the issue?
Thank you so much for having me on the show. It feels like being home back on a news set, kind of. So thank you for that. Mostly, I was circulating a petition at my church. And so that's, not just in my community, but in my church. And I was taking care of, parishioners, people that I go to church with, at a church where I was baptized 50 years ago in my own community. We don't even get the broadcast from the station that I was working for in North Platte, Nebraska, in Curtis. It's 45 minutes away. I drive each day, or did, to work there at the station. And this petition was a petition to, if you signed it and we had enough signatures, it goes on the ballot in November 8th for that democratic voice to speak out for the people of Curtis, then would decide if Curtis would be a sanctuary city or not. That's what the petition was.
Yeah, and I know that, you've been in this business for many years. You wear a number of hats. You're a reporter, anchor, producer, and a news director. I'm curious, have you ever had a complaint regarding your coverage, in particular when it comes to abortion issues?
I've never had a complaint from anybody about it because I've always been partial. I know the business. I know you tell both sides of the story. You tell the facts. And people in North Platte, Nebraska, I'm actually kind of sad to hear this, to be honest with you, but people in North Platte actually thought I was pro-choice because I was trying to be so balanced that I perhaps even went too far the other way to make sure that I covered both sides of the issue. The prayer life people in North Platte, she reached out to me. She goes, "Oh, praise God, you're pro-choice or pro-life. We thought you were pro-choice." So maybe, I know when Roe versus Wade was overturned, I was, of course, so overjoyed. And so, falling on my knees and thanking God and things like that, that I didn't touch that with a 10-foot pole. I had another reporter do that story. And I just made sure that it was balanced when he did.
I'm curious, when you were told that you were fired from your employer, what went through your mind?
I actually thought that when this happened, I thought, they're going to come beside me and say, we heard this from a liberal newspaper on the eastern side. They don't necessarily represent the views of the conservative area that you cover. I'm the smallest market in the gray media network. I'm the smallest TV station out of the nation that they employ. And they would have come beside me and said, what happened? How can we support you? Not, this is your last day.
Yeah, and we actually have to admit, we didn't talk directly to your former employer, that is, but the station manager did put out a statement in reference to your firing saying, quote, KNOP's news personnel are not permitted at any time and regardless of beliefs to actively engage in any political activity for any candidate, party, or ballot initiative. That said, Melanie, were you ever made aware of these terms? I mean, did you sign anything? Maybe was it in your contract, any of this language?
Well, first of all, I don't have a contract. I was at will or as needed. I did have a contract when I first started 5 years ago when I first came on as a multimedia journalist. But that was 3 years ago. That was a daughter died time ago. That was a mother died time ago. That was COVID time ago. That was a long time ago. And so, but since then, since 2020, I haven't had a contract. As far as they're telling me that in the handbook, it says things like that. I've never read that statement anywhere. I don't know. I honestly don't. I hired people. I've hired 7 or 8 people since I've been a news director, and never once in the hiring process did I ever say, here's this language or here's a handbook where this says this. I've never done that. That's never been part of the hiring process. So I don't know where they're getting that, honestly.
Yeah, unfortunately, we're running out of time, but I'm curious, before I let you go, what's next for you and what do you hope comes from all of this?
Well, first of all, I've had a burden taken off of my chest that I didn't even know was there. Now I can speak freely. I can speak completely for pro-life, and I can tell people the dangers of not being pro-life for the unborn and all of the things that go with that. I can be Christian. I can speak freely. I don't know. I do know that there may be a lawsuit so that this doesn't happen to somebody else in the future, because this will set a huge precedent for what can and can't happen for how a person is treated just because of their religion.
Well, Melanie, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us. We really appreciate it. Good luck with everything, and God bless you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, and God bless you also.
Russian President Vladimir Putin declares martial law in 4 areas of Ukraine. The areas are the ones the Kremlin claims to have annexed during recent voting. Meanwhile, aerial attacks continue across Ukraine, targeting the country's power infrastructure. While the United Kingdom's embattled prime minister is facing another setback. Liz Truss has lost a second senior minister in 1 week. Earlier today, the UK's Home Secretary resigned, saying that she has, quote, serious concerns about the direction of the government. The departure comes just days after Prime Minister Truss fired her Treasury chief. Coming up, analysis of a recent court ruling that should concern the faithful. A judge in New York recently ruled in favor of legal protections for polyamorous relationships. In her ruling on a case involving an apartment eviction, the judge said the definition of family is changing, and it is possible for a child to have more than 2 legal parents. Meantime, in several cities in Massachusetts, polyamorous relationships have been given legal protection. Father Thomas Petrie, president of the Dominican House of Studies in Washington, D.C., joins us now. Father, great to see you.
Always good to be with you, Tracy.
Okay, I guess there's a lot to unpack here. So I want to start off with this. Probably a lot of our viewers are watching right now, don't even know what this is. What's at the root of these relationships?
Well, these are relationships that have more than 2 people in it, and we shouldn't be surprised that there are people seeking civil and legal recognition of relationships that have more than 2 persons. Look, as Catholics, we know that what marriage has always been about is having children and raising children. Now, unfortunately, a lot of state governments, a lot of people don't seem to know that anymore. But when marriage is about children, marriage needs a man and a woman to have a child, and a mother and a father to raise the child. Once in the early 1970s, you begin having states that no longer defend marriage, no longer make it easy to get out of marriages. Once you have Obergefell legalizing gay marriage, certainly for most people now, marriage is nothing more than a public, solemn profession of love. If that's the case, why does it have to be a man and a woman? Why does it have to be only two people? And so people are taking this to the logical next conclusion, which is unfortunate because it's to the detriment of children, it's to the detriment of families, it's to the detriment of our country.
Yeah, and let's talk a little bit more about that, especially for the faithful. How concerning is this?
Oh, it's very concerning because the family is the core cell of society and the church. And we believe, and we know, and it's not just a belief, there are studies that show this, that children are best raised by the man and woman who are married, who produced them in a loving union and are committed to them, to raising them. And those secure the best outcomes for our children. And so when we have as a policy or as a cultural movement, not only that marriage is something that's no longer just a man and a woman, but also increasingly in some people's mind, not even just two people, it loses its whole meaning of what even marriage and family is. It's just whatever you want it to be. And the judge in New York said that. The definition of family is changing.
Yeah, and that's the thing I want to read. This was a headline, and this was coming from Fox News. NYC judge rules on polyamorous relationships. Perhaps time has arrived. Let's talk a little bit more about that and that ruling and the precedent that it sets.
Well, it's an unfortunate precedent, and it'd be interesting to see how that would, if a test case like this were to rise to the Supreme Court. Because historically, we've always understood the state had an interest in protecting the marriage of men and women for the sake of children, that children would be better citizens of the state, of the country, of society, if they were raised by a mother and a father. We know as Catholics that not only is the family the central unit, we also know that attacking the family attacks the very dignity of the human person.
Yeah. Where do you see this all going?
Well, it's all going into absurdity. I mean, as you look at the history of the church in society, Pope Benedict XVI in 1968, when he was just Joseph Ratzinger, said that there are these moments in history when society separates from God, separates from the church. We've seen it before, and it just goes over the cliff into absurdity. Unfortunately, that often entails a lot of suffering and struggle, because the further away from God you get, the further away you get from who we are as human persons, because we're made for God. And that entails denial of the human nature, and it entails suffering. Human experience ultimately will dictate and reinforce the truth.
Yeah, and I feel like that the most vulnerable really is being hurt the most of all, and that is the children. I want to pick up on that before I let you go. Something else I want to touch on. A report, speaking of the children, by The Spectator just came out recently, and they're reporting that Georgetown University's medical school, that they're teaching med students to treat transgender or gender dysphoric children with puberty blockers, hormone therapy as well. I'd like for you to talk a little bit about that, what the church teaches about that, and then also what it says that a Catholic institution is sort of implementing these for future doctors.
Well, it's unconscionable that any medical school would be teaching this. This is, I'm going to use the phrase, it's a snake oil. Mm-hmm. There are people who really have an illness that are uncomfortable in their bodies. Puberty blockers, hormone therapy, they have been untested in this way. Even the FDA does not approve using this kind of medicine for these purposes. It's a snake oil that some doctors are pushing. As Catholics, of course, we believe that the body is not incidental. It is not an accident. It's part and parcel of who we are. And if there is a sort of disjunction between who we think we are in our bodies, that is a spiritual, emotional, psychological issue that the body and modifying the body will not help.
Yeah, and doctors, as they say when they take that oath, do no harm.
Exactly, exactly.
We're running out of time, but I'm wondering if you have any advice for us regarding these subjects.
Well, to keep your children close, to always maintain, your values, and to teach our children our values, but also to pray for our society. It will go into absurdity. One wonders how further absurd it can be when you have doctors suggesting hormone treatments and body-altering surgeries for children. How much more absurd can it get than that? One will hope that in time God's grace will shine upon society and culture and bring about a vast conversion of mind and heart.
What can we do?
Well, what we can do is obviously, other than pray, but obviously support policies and support institutions that are speaking the truth and are actually providing legitimate care to those who have real psychological and medical needs.
Yeah, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. We always appreciate it.
Thank you, Tracy.
Thank you. God bless you. Up next, why Pope Francis is encouraging the faithful to revisit the story of our life. And learn more about a missionary group that serves nearly 70 countries around the world. Pope Francis says one way to discover Christ is to examine the story of our own life.
Diceva Sant'Agostino, rientra in te stesso, rientra in te stesso.
At his weekly talk to pilgrims at the Vatican, the Holy Father says looking back on our life can help us recognize all the little miracles God has performed. Pope Francis reminds the faithful this method especially worked for St. Augustine and his trademark phrase, late have I loved you, beauty so old and so new. Well, finally tonight, the Holy Father recently met with an order of missionaries working in nearly 70 countries around the world. It was part of the general meetings for the Missionary Oblates of Mary Immaculate. EWTN Vatican Bureau Chief Andreas Tannhauser has more.
With me here is Father Bonga from the Missionary Oblates of Mary Immaculate, who had their general chapter here in Rome. They also met the Holy Father just a few days back. Father Bonga, thank you so much for being with us. And could you tell us a little bit more about the Missionary Oblates of Mary Immaculate and your meeting here in Rome?
Thank you very much. Thank you for having us. Yes, we are a missionary congregation, Missionary Oblates of Mary Immaculate. We were founded in France about 205 years ago. It was in 1816. Currently, we are present in 67 countries, and we are about 3,500 brothers and priests in the world today. We gather every 6 years for what we call a general chapter. It's always a very powerful moment for us where we come together as a family to look at our life, to reflect and to meditate on who we are, but also to listen to each other. So we gathered as well this year on the 14th of September for a month. And as you will know, the congregation, we are divided into 5 major regions. So we listen to each other first of all. So each region presented a report about the issues and whatever is happening in their region, about poverty, but also about beautiful things they've been doing in mission, life-giving moments. And then we listened to Father General report on the state of the congregation. He challenged us a lot about our identity, that we need to come back to what we were founded for. We are missionaries. We need to rediscover our oblate identity in today's world. He also reminded us that we are over 200 years old as a congregation, and we have 3 choices before us. We either stagnate, that means we just remain the way we are, or we will die, we choose to die, or we are to be reborn. And he insisted a lot that we are not dying. We are going to be reborn, but we have to be converted to the person of Jesus Christ. So the theme of conversion has been very much present during this chapter and challenging us as pilgrims of hope in communion. That's a theme we chose for the chapter, and we've been reflecting on this, and it has animated us as a congregation for the past year.
And you've also met Pope Francis during your chapter here. What was his message to your congregation?
Yes, we met Pope Francis. There was a beautiful moment, very emotional for us, a moment of communion as well with the Pope, and to assure him as well of our prayers and of our support. He spoke very well with us. He reminded us, first of all, that you've chosen a very difficult theme, Pilgrims of Hope in Communion. And he insisted on that. He also challenged us about our identity as missionaries, that we need to come back to that and be what we were founded to be. And then he reminded us that we are pilgrims of hope, which means we are people on the journey, walking in the footsteps of Jesus Christ.
And real quickly, before I let you go, maybe also let me know, what is the biggest challenge today for a missionary?
Biggest challenge today for a missionary is that of witnessing. But I will say as well, we are facing a problem of faith. Do we still believe in Jesus Christ? Do I still believe in what I'm doing, in what I professed when I made my vows? That's a big challenge. There are many things that are challenging our faith, that are challenging our hope, that are challenging our identity as well, that we can't witness anymore. That's the challenge before us.
Father Bonga, thank you so much for being here as a witness, also as somebody who takes up this challenge, and for being a missionary and a witness to the love of Christ to the people. In Rome, Andrea Stonehauser, EWTN News Nightly.
And thank you for watching tonight. For the entire EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Tracy Sabol. Good night and God bless.